All right, friends. As prefaced on episode 77 of the Spicer Speaking podcast, we're all Gallery Classic all the time on this show. First guest this week, we're starting right at the top of the food chain with the tournament director for the upcoming Gallery Classic. Welcome, Michelle DeLancy, to the Spicer Speaking podcast. Hello, Michelle.
Hey, Judd. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate being able to speak with you. I think what is now maybe the third time in the last couple months as we're gearing up for the inaugural Gallery Classic. Let's start with this, Michelle. Let's start kind of broadly. We have had the PGA Tour champions here in the desert. It's been 30 years since we've had it. For those that are maybe not all that aware of what the product is, maybe just seen it in television. You've obviously been around the tour for a long time. How do you see it? What's the vibe? What's the tenor? What's the atmosphere of PGA Tour champions?
Yeah, I think what you'll see differently on the PGA Tour champions than maybe what you've seen with the PGA Tour or the LPGA is these guys are here to compete and to win, but they've also gotten to do this for a long time. So a reminder that the PGA Tour champions are guys that are 50 and older. A lot of them have played and won on the PGA Tour and continuing their career by playing on the PGA Tour champions. Some of them have went to Q school this year and they're playing on the PGA Tour champions for the first time and so excited to be there. So I think I guess they would say it's never maybe too late to get out and really start your professional career in golf, but these guys, they have a lot of stories. They've played, they've been to these tournaments many, many times. They've grown up together, and so you can see that and feel that as you kind of see them vibe as they play in the pro-am with the amateurs. They have stories to tell. They get to know the amateurs. Sometimes they do business together, and then the amateurs get to have lunch with them in the clubhouse before after their round, which is something different than maybe you wouldn't see other places. I think watching these guys when they play on the weekends, they have history together. Again, they're playing to win, but they're also like they're fun. They're high fiving, they're telling jokes. They're some of them are riding in carts and some of them are walking. It's kind of a mixture of all that, but I think the thing that's most recognizable about this tour is that these faces are recognizable. When we talk about the field that's going to be here in 12 days, they are people that you and I have seen, have grown up with, have watched for many, many years. Some more people will say, "Is he still playing? Is he still around?" And he is still around, or he's coming back specifically to play in this event for a couple of the guys. So I think the overall the tour likes to say like these guys are good or these guys are kind of like you're rubbing elbows with legends, and that really is the case out here. I mean, it's easy for them to walk around the course or get an autograph in the autograph area or just to be able to high five as they walk by, and they're very approachable, which is a lot of fun.
Approachability is a word that comes to mind. Another
Yeah.
is accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
When we've gotten used to over time with the American Express in January, wonderful event. Sometimes you're going to get a player to interact with you, and sometimes you're not. I mean, they're playing for $1 million, so they're at the office. Most, if not many, are in the prime of their careers. And once the tournament gets going, I think from at least from a media perspective, just to kind of get a sense of the storytelling of the players, they're kind of shut off. I mean, you'll have a presser, you might get a few minutes with them. Conversely, with the 51 years of the LPGA that we had, a little bit of the same. They're in their office, they're playing for a major championship. So there's a real earnestness to the accessibility. Granted, the ladies will be out there, sign a lot of autographs and so forth. The PGA Tour Champions is a different animal. And for everything that you just described, it's just a lot more relaxed. It's a lot easier vibe. There seems to
Yep.
be so much more interaction with the fans. And when you walk beside the ropes, this is my personal experience with PGA Tour Champions. You're going to get some of those high fives during the tournament action. You're going to get some of those conversations. You're going to get some of those highs and smiles and nods. Might change on the back nine on Sunday, but for the rest of the tournament, the accessibility is really unparalleled for pro golf.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you said it correctly. I think I wouldn't say that those guys are out there putting on a show. I think they're out there playing golf and still very much enjoying it. But they also say not taking themselves too seriously, or maybe I don't know if the correct word is egos, but I think those are there in a different way than maybe when it was, 30 years ago and they were in their, if we would call it, prime of the PGA Tour, and working to win and out there with their young families and other things like this. And now they're a lot of them are older kids or grandparents and just excited to be there and have their family there if they're coming to visit or anything else. But yeah, I would say very much more approachable, and you can kind of feel it in just the vibe of being in the area.
Definitely can. I kind of, again, harken back to my own personal experience as a Minnesota native, years and years of covering the former 3M Championship before it became
Yeah.
PGA Tour event, now the 3M Open. And I was a young, or at least younger, writer at the time. And I remember was kind of nervous. I was going up like post round to do an interview with Nick Price, whom at the time was still, he wasn't that far removed from his heyday or his, having major championships. And he remains, that moment sticks with me because of how nice he was and how easy he was and the smile on his face. And he's kind of just happy to be there, still playing golf for money
Yeah.
amongst guys that he had participated against, still in a very competitive atmosphere. But that moment, still many, many years later, just sticks with me for the ease with which the vast wealth of these guys conduct themselves on PGA Tour champions.
Yeah, you said a great one. Nick Price is such a nice guy, and I miss him playing out here. But he and many others. I mean, I could list the guys that I've gotten to know well, or that remain friends. Or I left working on the Champions Tour for a number of years and back, and it's like we all just pick up where we left off. But Nick, many others, the Corey Pavins, Mark O'Meara's, Fred Funk, who we got to see last week, Fred Couples, all of those guys, like it just are just very nice guys, just very easy to chat with. And we may talk about their golf game, but we'll also talk about other things that are going on, or things that they did while they're here, or who they got to meet, or anything like that. Like you said, just a memorable experience. And I think that's the biggest thing that an amateur would take away from playing in this pro-am with them, is that they had a great story, or they were nervous when they've teed off because they weren't sure what to expect, and by the end they're pumped to play with whoever they got to play with and follow them for the weekend, even if at the beginning of the round they didn't know who that person was, and by the end, who X name is their new favorite player, and they're coming back every day to cheer him on, and he's going to definitely say, "Hey Jed, good to see you again, thanks for coming out, high five you," or anything else, which is not what you would see on other tournaments or at other events necessarily.
You referenced your past PGA Tour champions life. That was for many years running
Yeah.
Boeing Classic,
Yes.
just up in Seattle or outside of Seattle. For all your years running that, there are one or two things that you really took away, Michelle, as the sweet spot, the recipe for what makes a PGA Tour Champions event work. What would the one or two thing be for running a successful tournament?
The first thing that came to mind when you started to think about this, or started to talk about that, or ask that question, is volunteers. A volunteer is a crucial and a very important part to this tournament. In Seattle, I had the pleasure of being with the tournament for a little over 13 years. We had a little over 900 volunteers that were needed at that tournament because the way the golf course was set up and other things like that. And on my final year, there was 68 volunteers that had been with me since day one. So
Well,
68 volunteers that had been there nonstop for 13 years. Many, many others were there for many other years, but those volunteers really become like family to each other. They're signing up for the same committee. It's like summer camp reunion when they're coming back. But I think the bigger thing is that they have the ins and outs to all the things that we need within the tournament. We're building that here with the Gallery Classic, and a lot of the volunteers that we get to work with here moving forward have had experience here in the desert, either with the LPGA or the American Express, but a lot of them are coming from other events, or they've just seen what a great time it is and they're signing up for the first time. So I think these volunteers really help make the tournament the success that it is. And then the other really important piece is the sponsors and having the right sponsors in place. And in Seattle, I had the pleasure of working with Boeing for a very long time, which not much needs to be said about Boeing and the sponsor that they are, but really the company that they are. And here I have the pleasure of working with a new title sponsor, a sponsor that's never been a sponsor of anything before. So they're learning a lot in this first year. And they are a biomedical company that chose to name the tournament after their early cancer detection test, which is called the Galleri test. So I think the sponsor and who they bring with them, their vendors, their partners, their customers, their board members, their fans in certain ways, those are all, I think, very important pieces to this tournament and really helping us set the tone of what the tournament's going to be like. And I know that the Gallery is doing that here with us as we set up the Galleri Classic.
I'm going to touch briefly on the volunteers. Michelle, been around to a lot of golf courses by virtue of the peak season. Last couple of weeks, played a lot of golf. Of course, we had the Gallery Classic Media Day in Mission Hills. That was one of the recent rounds. Point being that run across no shortage of folks telling me that they're going to serve as volunteers for the inaugural Gallery Classic. They're still looking for a few more signups.
We're happy with the little over 500 that we have right now. I think the opportunity that we have here, when I mentioned that we have a larger number in Seattle, the great thing about this area is that people are signing up for 3 and 4 shifts. In Seattle, we had seen, 1 or 2 shifts by the way that where the tournament was set up, other things like that. So here, we're encouraging volunteers to volunteer. They do pay to volunteer. Within that volunteer package, they receive a couple shirts, tickets to the tournament, lunch, parking passes. So a high value package for the price that they pay, but also a reminder that those money that they're paying helps us give more back to charity by covering the cost of the volunteers. But the volunteers, there's about 22 different committees, Judd, that they have an opportunity to be on. So walking score, a ticket taker, a marshal, those sorts of things. We do have more opportunities, I think, with this beautiful golf course. There's a lot of different ins and outs of where these balls can go and where the players can go. And so we have a need for more marshals. I think the marshal need is the highest that we have in all of the different committees. And we have a few more opportunities available for people to sign up to be a marshal. And the great thing that we're working with Mission Hills Country Club here is that if you do volunteer for 3 or more shifts, then we are able to offer a round of golf to the volunteers that do volunteer for 3 or more shifts. So for people that have always wanted to play Mission Hills and not had the opportunity to do that, there's an opportunity for them to volunteer, and then they get to come back and play one of the courses as well.
Friends, you're tuning into episode 77 of the Spicer Speaking podcast. Michelle DeLancy, tournament director for the inaugural and upcoming Gallery Classic, taking place just about 12 days from now, March 20th to the 26th. You can find information on volunteering, on tickets, on the sponsor, and much, much more online at thegalleryclassic.com. Field includes, I'm going to try to give there's so many great players, and I'm going to try to kind of whip through this rundown. It's going to start with Bernhard Langer. We'll get back to him in a moment. Fred Couples is in the field. Ernie Els, Steve Stricker, Jim Furyk, BJ Singh, John Daly, Miguel Angel Jimenez, Darren Clark. And we've also got John Cook, Corey Pavin, Jose Maria Olazabal, Colin Montgomery, among many, many others of the 78 competitors who will be in the inaugural Gallery Classic field. Got to get back to Bernhard Langer, who was amply discussed at the media day, and there were some great questions presented to Fred Funk, I think, namely, I had opportunity to interview Bernhard Langer. This is going back, Michelle, again to the 3M championship. This is a while ago. This is maybe like 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I was amazed. I was amazed by the shape that he was in then. Got a special opportunity for the debut Gallery Classic that Bernhard Langer, of course, has now tied Hale Irwin, the all-time Champions Tour win mark, at 45. He does have the Hogue Classic coming up next week, which he has won once before. Well, that was a while back. I think it was the Toshiba Classic then, and it was that was a while ago. 2008. It's been a spell since he's won that tournament. I'm not saying we're not cheering against Bernhard Langer to not win that event, but it would be pretty cool if he came here to the Dinah Shore Tournament course in Mission Hills with a chance to break that all-time record. Yeah. Of all the questions that you've received, that's got to be near the top of the list as we get ready for the event.
Yeah. Judd, let's make sure that we say how many times that he's won and what that record is that he's breaking. He's won 45 times on the PGA Tour Champions, which is awesome, right? He and Hale Irwin matched up. I loved what he said when he won that. And he said, Hale, if you're watching, let's have a glass of champagne or something together, which was cool. Like they weren't out to get each other, but a great accomplishment for both of them. Bernhard did win in Seattle twice when I was there. So yes, he is used to winning on the Champions Tour. And we would love to have him win the Gallery Classic. Like you're saying, we'd love for history to be made a couple times at the tournament with an inaugural champion as him, but then him breaking that record. And he is just a very kind guy. He, as we can see, has been out on the PGA Tour Champions for many years. He's in great shape. I know Fred in the conversation we had over Media Day last week talked about, what is he doing to prepare and that sort of stuff. And we learned that Bernhard likes to eat ice cream before he goes to bed at night, and there's not a lot of
Yeah.
lifting and different stuff. He is definitely in shape. I think he walks. He practices a lot. He has a wonderful caddy, a humble caddy that's been with him for many years, Terry, and they just work really well together. I think they're kind of those silent guys that are out there and kind of staying under the radar. If I talk about Bernhard and the way that he is with our amateurs and how he's with our sponsors, he's that guy that when you play with him, Judd, and you'll see him eating breakfast in the clubhouse before, and you'll have no problem of thinking, I want to go sit with them. You should. That seat that's open next to him is for anybody to go sit with them, and they have a great conversation. When you finish your round with him, he's making sure to say, hey guys, let's go in and eat, and he's sitting in there with you, and then he's going to go out and practice for a little bit more. So he's the full deal of the full experience on the Champions Tour, and then he's that guy that just kind of shows up and wants to make sure that people are having a great time. He takes care of his family and his sponsors, and he and Terry have been a great team for many years, as you can see when he's won 45 tournaments. So we're excited to have him back, and I think the crowd will really enjoy getting to watch him play.
I think so. When you and I had the pleasure to meet in person for the first time at the media day, it was the first question I asked you, and all you had to do was point to the headline of the press release,
Yeah.
and I was thrilled. I mean, to me, this I'm not just looking forward to the inaugural event, but this adds a different layer of
Yeah.
interest for a global audience to see if this is the place where he can pull it off. I mean, to me, we can take up 3 shows talking about Bernhard Lager's amazing career. What stands out to me most, and you've seen this firsthand, Michelle, is that oftentimes on PGA Tour champions, we see the fresh 50-year-olds come in and do well. And if they really are motivated to stick with it, they'll have that 3 or 4 years, maybe 5, where they kind of get to 55. And then, like per that Nick Price example that we laid out, then they kind of generally tone it down a little bit. They might step away a little bit, probably don't spend as much time jamming it out, practicing, traveling the world, going to these events. But Bernhard Langer, to me, it's the most underrated record in all of golf. The amount of fortitude and longevity it takes to be this good for this long, it's just amazing to me. And I want to, there's no cheering in the press box, but I want to see him up there come Sunday.
Yeah. I think what he does a great job is that he shows up for a lot of these events. He's not necessarily kind of, I would say, picking and choosing which events that he wants to be in. He does a good job. There's 28 events on the PGA Tour Champions, and there's a good chance that Bernhard's playing in your event. And if not, then it's a scheduling thing or a decision he's made in advance, and not like he's not showing up and deciding if he's going to play that week. Like he's showing up to win, as we can see, and he's done that many times. And I think people don't quite understand until they actually see him play in person, of like just that mindset that you can see as he's playing. And he has a different vibe than what you'd see with his colleagues as they're out there playing too. There's a little bit of a different mindset on how he sets out there, and a fun one to watch for sure.
One more for you today, Michelle. I'm not that good at math, but I try to do a little bit of math. Obviously, as referenced again, we're so used to the ladies playing this course for over a half century, 51 years. So much like folks have gotten accustomed to watching the Masters, we know these holes, we know these shots, we know where you want to put the ball, we know where you don't want to leave the ball. The ladies generally played around 6,700 yards for their former event, and it'll be so fascinating to see. And you guys had the tee boxes for the Gallery Classic set up when we played the media day, which is a great idea to get a sense of
Where
different
are they
vantages
actually
of the
doing?
course.
Yeah.
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 So the fellas are going to play about, again, not that great at math, but about 5% more golf course maybe about another 300 yards or so than we're used to seeing with the ladies. Coming with that is the fact that the Champions Tour players hit it pound for pound about 10% farther than the ladies did. So we're going to definitely get that. I don't know how that math is going to play out,
Yeah.
but we're going to have some different advantages of these holes. We're going to have, I think, some different landing areas and approaches than what we're used to. How do you see the course set up? I guess my question is being different than what we become accustomed to over many years of the LPGA.
Yeah, I didn't have the pleasure of getting to see the LPGA event when they were here. I've heard a lot of stories, and people are telling me different ways that I could set up the course that's similar. And I think the biggest change for us will be the rough won't be as long. I know that we've talked about that when I saw you last week, as being able to understand that LPGA had it set like a major. PGA Tour champions will have that rough right around probably 2 inches or so. So not off from what those players or members are seeing daily. I think that was a few member requests or questions that I got when I first started introducing myself as I moved out here. And they're like, how long is this rough going to go? And how long are you going to take over our golf course? And I think they're probably pleasantly surprised that the golf course is in beautiful shape. They do a great job. Mission Hills does a great job. The rough isn't super long, so that one, let's try to stay out of the rough. But two, if we are in the rough, then it won't quite totally attack you like you maybe have seen on the LPGA. I think the other is that the yardage is longer. You may have seen when you were here last week that we did add a first tee, an additional tee box on the first tee to give the guys a little bit longer without going all the way back. And it just gives the PGA Tour champions some flexibility on really saying, how are the guys playing the course and how can we continue to challenge them with the pin placement and that sort of stuff. I did talk to the rules official yesterday as we talked about setting up the course. And, one of the things is how are we going to set up 18? That's a huge course, a huge draw.
Yeah.
One of the questions that you asked me and probably is coming up next is the champion going to jump in? But what we want to be able to see first is how are they going to approach that hole, right? How are they going to be able to approach that shot? And I think that the tour will set that up the way that the LPGA set that up is that, we want them to get on the green in two. And so what's the way that they're going to do that with that tee box and with that yardage and how they're going to set that hole to do it. And so, with every hole like the LPGA did, it will be set up for as a challenge to the players, but also something that will be able to be enjoyable for us as fans or spectators to be able to watch either in person or on the Golf Channel.
That home hole, by the way, can set up all the way back at about
Yeah.
650 yards. I don't know if anybody in the world, or at least anyone in the desert world, is getting on there in two with those tees all the
No.
way back. Friends, the event is the inaugural Gallery Classic PGA Tour Champions back in the desert for the first time since 1993. To get your tickets, find out more about that volunteer information, player field, all your news online at thegalleryclassic.com. Michelle DeLancy, tournament director, so appreciative of your time. Kudos. I'm putting together a really stellar field for the debut Gallery Classic. I look forward to seeing you at Mission Hills in a couple of weeks.
Thanks, Chad. I appreciate it. We'll look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks for your time.
Yep. Bye-bye.